Hey there, welcome back to the worst Warmachine channel on the internet. I'm Malorian, this is Malorian Weekly, and this is going to be my second take at the throw power attack. Now, last time I did this, I made a few too many mistakes, and you know what? The bar is low here at the Malorian channel, but it's not like bare bones low. We're one step higher, so I want to redo it to make sure I get rid of those mistakes. Secondly, it was just a good idea for me to redo it with examples you can actually see. So we're going to be doing that here today. So just very quickly, why am I doing this series on power attacks? Well, very simply, a lot of people don't know how they work and they don't use them. And because of that, they're by default worse players. And what I really mean with that, to be fair, is not that you're awful people and you're going to lose all your games. What I'm saying is that this is a game of knowledge and it's a game of having options to be dealing with problems. So if you know more options, you'll be able to use them when these things come up. They might be situational, but if you know how to do these things when they come up, they can just win you the game. So we are now on a throws. Throws are one of the most complicated ones out there. I think it actually is. It has 3 different pages you have to reference to actually look it up in the book. There's how to do an actual throw. There's what happens when you're thrown. There's rules of least disturbance. And by the way, the last video I did was actually talking about the least disturbance. So I'll be talking about it quickly here, but if you want something more in depth, go back and see that one. So, okay, first of all, who can even do these power attacks? Well, we're talking your battle group. We're talking about jacks. We're talking about beasts. We're talking about horrors. Now, through this, I'll talk about mainly the jack version, but it's all the same idea going through. You basically either have to be a light, a heavy, or a colossal. No lessers can be doing this right now. And in order to do this power attack at all, you have to at least have one non-crippled open fist. Now, if you look at the model, you can normally tell like, oh, look, he has an open hand. I guess he has an open fist. But what really matters is that you go in and you look at the rules, and underneath the weapon, there'll be a little icon there for the open fist. So, you might look at a sentinel and be like, oh yeah, there's a fist there. You can do a throw. No, you can't. Just because you have a hand, your weapon there actually has to have the open fist and not be crippled. So again, if you're lucky and you're like a beast or a horror, you don't care because your hand's never going to be crippled. But if you're a jack, that might actually come up. So the first thing you need to do in order to actually do a power attack is spend a focus. And again, I'm only going to be talking about jacks here, but if you were a horror, you'd spend an essence. If you were a beast, you'd force for a fury. You have to actually spend to actually do it. So you better allocate or have your free one there so you have something to use to actually do a power attack. So we'll start off here and say that this ironclad wants to throw this sentinel because, swan on swan hate is a thing apparently. Now, the first thing you have to do is, well, get it within range. So the range of what you can actually do this with is whatever the range of that open fist weapon is. So if you have a weapon that's a sword, let's say I had a Stormclad here with a 2-inch reach sword, but a 1-inch reach fist that actually has that open fist rule, he can do it from 1 inch away. So, okay. You also can't charge in and do this. All these types of power attacks, you have to just be able to walk up and do it. So you can make your regular advance, get within that inch in this case. Could be higher if you're something else like a colossal that could be 2 inches. But once you get within that distance, now you can pay your focus to actually go and do that power attack. So that's great. You're now in the process of doing a power attack. The next thing you have to do is actually hit. So you'll look at your mat, you'll look at the mat of whatever you're going after, roll your 2 dice, and if you get like equal it or get better than that, you hit it, and that's fantastic. If you miss, well, that's bad. Then all you've done is wasted lots of your focus and potential attacks, because really, whenever you do a power attack, it replaces both your initials Plus, there's that focus. So remember, if this ironclad wants to come over here and do a throw, that means you're not making your initial hammer attack, you're not making your initial fist attack, and you didn't use that focus to say buy another hammer attack or boost damage or whatever you might have done with it, is all being based into this one throw. So we'll be talking about later about times about when you'd want to be doing throws, but just know there's a real investment here and there's a real risk because there's multiple points of failure as we actually run through this. So, okay, we got into range, we spent our focus to do a power attack, we rolled to hit. This can actually be boosted too, so it could be 2 focus we're boosting into this. And now what? Well, now we're actually having to do the nether step, which is, okay, you've done a power attack, you've hit, and now you need to overpower your target. So you're going to be comparing your strength to the strength of the target. Now, what you're going to be doing is rolling 1 dice and adding it to that strength. And you as the thrower either need to equal or exceed the defender's number in order to actually throw them. Now, this is where we're going to be bringing in some 2-handed jacks or beasts or monstrosities or whatever else. If you have 2 hands, that's great if you're doing the throwing, because if you're doing the throwing, you roll 2 dice rather than 1. I don't know why it's like that. You know, if the ironclad's trying to throw the freebooter still just rolls 1 dice. That's it. So you only really use your 2 hands ever to throw the other one, not to defend. And otherwise, 2-handed throws and 1-handed throws are exactly the same. So you're going to roll those dice, whatever you get, add it to your base strength. Actually, add it to your current strength. So if you have any spells or abilities that is increasing your strength, that's going to be applying to this roll as well. So just make sure you keep that in mind. Now, that's really why lights trying to throw heavies, this is where they're going to have problems. You know, this light can come up here, it can spin a focus, it can try hitting pretty easily, but now when it gets to the strength test, that's probably where it's going to fail. So whenever you're considering to do a throw attack, this is probably the biggest fail point that you really have to consider. It really sucks to go through all these things, and then you might actually even have the advantage going in. Maybe you have 1 more strength, you roll your dice, you roll a 1, they roll a 6. Sorry, you fail. So usually, if you want to be really safe, you want to have something that has 2 hands, or just be a lot stronger than whatever you're trying to throw. You know, like, of course, if you're trying to throw a light, if you're trying to throw a regular warrior model, that's going to be a lot easier. So that strength proportion there is really going to be very key and something you have to keep in mind of. I mean, sometimes when I want to do a throw, before I even go down, if I'm even considering a throw, I'll say like, okay, what's the strength of your heavy? Because if I'm going into this and your heavy is already a point or 2 stronger than mine, that's a lot of dedicated resources that has a high potential of failure. So I'm not going to do that. But let's go back to this easy one where the ironclad's trying to throw this little tiny sentinel. We're going to be rolling 1 dice because you'll have only 1 open fist. Add it to your strength. They're going to be doing the same thing. The ironclad has a significant strength advantage, so odds are it's going to actually win, and it's going to now throw this model away. Now, when it comes to actually throwing this model, you have a couple of options. One, you can throw it directly away. Now, if you ever want to throw it directly away, that's going to be half your strength, whatever it is currently. So again, if you have some modifiers, let's say you have +4 strength right now, you'd be adding that 4, then dividing by 2. And that's how far it'd be throwing it directly away. So you really just say like, okay, the throws happened, and this is where you want to kind of get out your proxy bases and say, from this model here, I can't even remember what the ironclad strength is. Let's pretend it's 12, just for easy numbers. It would go exactly 6 inches away. And sometimes that landing zone can be really difficult to know where it's going to go, especially if you pick it up. You're like, oh no, I moved it. Now where's it supposed to go? So if anyone's doing a throw at all, just be like, okay, nobody touch any models, get out the proxies, and you can be placing your proxy wherever it's supposed to be. Get out your lasers, make sure everything looks nice, and make sure you have that model down before you actually replace this one here. Now, let's go with this one first before we talk about the other example. If we were going to be throwing directly away, it's going to go sailing to that point and fall down. Now, it doesn't care about terrain during that point as far as terms of, say, let's say there's some rubble here. It would sail right over the rubble, land, doesn't matter. It doesn't slow it down at all. If there is something like a wall or a building, it's going to hit it and then fall down at that point there. So just know that there's that. Now, there's going to be a damage roll involved. If you actually throw something, it's going to go that distance as long as it doesn't hit, say, some terrain and then stop and fall down. And then it's going to be knocked down, if it can be, and it's going to take a power attack damage roll. So that's 2 dice plus the strength again. So this is going to be a weaker hit. So again, we're not usually doing this to do damage. We're doing this to move the model somewhere, to knock it down, to knock something else down. Again, we'll talk examples later, but know that there will be a damage roll here associated. If you either threw it into, say, like a wall or a building or a model of equal or larger size, it's going to stop at that point, fall down, and then at that point, this model is going to be knocked down, like we said. It's going to take a damage roll, but because it either hit that terrain or that equal or larger size model, there'll be an additional dice of damage. So sometimes you can make up that less strength because you're not adding the power of your weapon by getting the extra dice for throwing them into some building or another model. This is also a damage roll that you can boost. So if you were to throw them into another jack and boost it, well, you can do 4 dice damage. So do keep that in mind. Now, the target that's being thrown into or gets hit by this is also potentially going to be taking a damage roll as well. So let's say, for example, we were over here. We're going to say that Kane is 6 inches away. We're going to throw directly down. It's going to fall. Both of these are going to be taking a power attack damage roll. However, Kane is not going to be taking a boosted roll because it was not thrown into, and you can't boost that attack. So no additional dice damage, and you can't boost on that one that you fell on. Now, this was where it can get very interesting for least disturbance. And this is where I get called over for judge rules lots of times. Now, if we throw this and the 6 inches has it so that this model is more on the back part of Kane, well, if we remember our rules of least disturbance, the model coming in says everybody else get out of the way, so Kane's going to come forward. If that 6 inches brought it so that Kane was closer to the back, Kane's going to slide back. If it's the side, whatever. Just again, as a quick reminder, for least disturbance, wherever is the, first of all, the model being thrown is the one saying, everybody else, get out of here. And then apart from that, all those models underneath it, you move the least amount needed to get out of the way. The only time you don't do that is when the thing is actually landing on, can't move. So let's say, for example, the 6 inches away, and this is even hard to say because there's not a lot of stuff here. Like a lot of times if you run into those things, it's going to stop, right? Like the things that can't move for least disturbance for a throw, it'll be a wall. Well, it's going to stop before it goes on the wall. Or it's going to be something like a colossal where it's, okay, it can't move, but again, bam, I'm going to hit you and I'm going to stop there. So there's no least disturbance. I'm just stopping there. Now, something else I should talk about here too is that if that model being thrown hits a model that's larger than it, then what happens is that this one takes it gets knocked down. It takes a damage roll with an additional dice that you can boost, but that model that is larger than the one being thrown is not knocked down and does not take a damage roll. So that's another one that's forgotten a lot. So make sure you really keep that in mind. So again, if we're doing something and we're saying, okay, Ironclad, going to be throwing the Sentinel, we're going to walk up, we're going to get within range of that melee weapon, we're going to spend a focus to actually do the power attack, we're going to roll the hit, we're going to roll a dice, adding it to our strength, 2 dice if we have 2 open fists, and then if I'm going to throw it directly away, it's going to go half my strength and either stop when it gets to that half my strength distance, or if it hits a equal or larger size model or a wall or a building. And then it's going to take its damage roll and it's going to land on things, potentially knock them down. Know too as well that if I'm throwing, if there's anything that was smaller, so again, we only said we stopped if we hit an equal size or smaller. If Kane is right behind this Sentinel, and when we throw it, it goes right over his head. So that's not going to knock him down. It's only if it actually lands on him. So do keep that in mind. But we do have another option. Let's say we want to knock down Kane, but he's not directly behind here. Well, first of all, one thing we can do is that when we're moving into position, just move into a spot where you can throw it directly away, and then, okay, that's easy. But let's say we can't because there's a building, there's a wall, there's something that's stopping us from doing that. Well, you can also do another option where you do your power attack, you hit, you do your strength attack, and instead of throwing it directly away, you can throw it at another model. Now, if the model's out of range, let's say there's something way over here and it's past that 6 inches, you still do that directly, go there, go down the 6 inches, that's it, laser guided. If it is actually in range, like Kane is here, you have to now hit that model as well. So this is, even though you're throwing and it sounds like a ranged attack, everything to do with a throw power attack is a mat. It's like you're grabbing them, and I don't know, even though you're throwing, you're going to do your mat against them as well. But you're now going to be rolling to be hitting this. And again, this is a roll that you can boost if you wanted. Now, if you're to actually hit, then this model is going to come in, land basically almost right on its head, and then it's going to have to move out of the way. If you miss, it's going to scatter from that point, and it's only going to scatter D3 inches. So let's say he goes for Kane and it misses. We're going to go for a scatter, so it's going to say go 1 inch this way. Well, the way that you actually do this is you figure out where that final location is. And again, I actually just broke my rule there. I said do your proxies first. If we would have scattered and the scattered brought it over here, this is now the direction it goes. So let's say that if I was to actually hit Kane, I would miss this other model that's in the way with that path to where it'd be following. But now that we missed, we scattered, and the line's going from here to here, that line will now hit this jack, and it's going to land there instead. So that's another one that's usually messed up. A lot of people kind of think like, oh no, I'm throwing it here, and then basically scatters from that point, and that's where it lands. No, that's where it's going to be its intended landing spot, and then you're going to be doing a straight line from there to that point. And again, if you contact something else during that way, that's where you're going to be stopping. All right, that's really the rules. There's a lot to it. We spent a good 17 minutes talking about what a throw power attack is, which is really laser guided if it's either straight ahead or if you're throwing at something out of range. If it is something in range, you have to actually roll to hit them. If you miss, you're going to scatter to figure out your last or your intended location. That'll be D3 inches away from them, and then do that line. But how are you actually going to be using this? When is the right time to actually do a throw? Well, one of them is when you have things like those high defense casters or models where you don't really care about the damage you're doing to this. You want to knock them down. And I gotta say, guys, in Mark III, these laser guided throws are super dangerous, where you can just line it up and say, yep, I want to be exactly like this, so that 6 inches ahead is going to land on Kane's head. Not only is he going to be knocked down, he's going to be taking a damage roll. That's huge. But you can also do these in other ways where, again, if we have this set up where, okay, I want to be knocking down Kane, I can move my other model back over here, and then when I come over, I can see this one, and so when I go to throw it, I can target this model over here, go directly 6 inches, land it here on Kane, he's knocked down, same thing like we were talking about. If you're not just trying to knock those things down, sometimes you're trying to knock down whatever models you're dealing with. Some cav models are like that, where they don't like being knocked down, and then they're not really doing anything. Another thing you might be doing is trying to clear a zone, right? If we're trying to score this zone here, maybe I don't really have enough attacks in order to destroy this monstrosity, but I could try throwing it out. So that's something you might want to be thinking about. Maybe as well, I want to throw things out of control range so that, you know, if it's a jack, you can't get any focus. And if you can't get any focus and you're knocked down, you're a really sad panda. Or maybe you're a beast. And if you're thrown out of the control area there, you can't have your fury removed and you might frenzy and your whole activation is wasted for that beast. So throws can be very, very interesting, whether you're trying to knock down a target, whether you're trying to clear a zone, whether you're trying to do some control type play. And if you remember when they come up, they can be extremely, extremely good, especially when you start lining up multiple throws. You know, sometimes people will be very careful to make sure that there isn't that 6 inches you can line directly on Kane, but you start thinking like, okay, well, if I throw this light 6 inches here and then 6 inches here, that's how I can get around and actually try and get to it. So throws, very, very complicated. Hopefully this showed you the rules and some examples of how these things work. If you have any questions whatsoever, please post them down below. But otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.